They were warned not to leave camp after dark, Deathworld girl asked, because of the wolves. The first howl reached the landing platform before the last cargo case touched the ground. Taran Ilith froze with both hands wrapped around a specimen locker. The sound rolled over the black ridges surrounding the hollow march, low enough that he felt it through the metal deck beneath his boots before his translator assigned it a category. Predatory territorial vocalization, estimated source distance 4.8 kilometers. Nobody moved for 3 seconds. Then the specimen locker slipped from Taran's fingers. Professor Oren Valek caught one corner before it struck the deck. Easy, the old ecologist said. Taran grabbed the case again, embarrassed by the heat spreading through the skin along his neck. Across the platform, Lena Ward had stopped unloading her pack. The human exchange student stood very still, one hand holding a strap, her face turned toward the western ridges. Taran waited for her fear response. Humans had expressive faces. That was one of the first things exchange students learned. Fear tightened the mouth, widened the eyes, changed breathing, pulled the shoulders inward. Lena did none of those things. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly. Another call came from farther south. Then a third answered from somewhere Taran could not place. Lena looked at the grass. Not at the ridge. The grass. Thin silver blades bent east beneath the evening wind. She watched them for 2 seconds, then returned to her pack. Taran stared at her. You heard that? Yeah. That was a Veya hound. So I gathered. You sound very calm. Lena pulled a rolled sleeping mat free from the cargo net. I'm carrying 40 kilos of research equipment down a ramp. If I panic, I'll probably drop something expensive. That is not what I meant. I know. She smiled once and walked away. Taran disliked the answer immediately. He disliked it even more because he could not tell whether it was confidence or stupidity. He had read enough about Earth to know the distinction was sometimes difficult. The Hollow March had been selected as the final off-world component of their xenobiology semester because it was dangerous in what Professor Valek liked to call an educationally useful way. There were no acid oceans, no storms capable of stripping metal from buildings, no airborne organisms that dissolved lung tissue. Nemoris was not classified as a death world. Most of the planet was pleasant. The Hollow March simply happened to contain one of the highest concentrations of large predatory fauna within 300 light-years of the university. According to the orientation packet, 7 native species exceeded the standard interstellar threat threshold for intelligent bipeds. 3 were nocturnal. 2 hunted cooperatively. 1 possessed defensive spines capable of piercing light environmental armor. And the largest population belonged to the Veya hounds. Taran had spent the entire trip pretending that fact did not bother him. Now one had howled before he had even finished unloading. He decided the planet was being unnecessarily theatrical. Their research camp sat inside a shallow ring of basalt at the eastern edge of the basin. 6 modular shelters formed a rough crescent around a central equipment station. Thin perimeter posts had been driven into the soil every 15 meters, each one emitting a pulsed frequency intended to discourage large fauna from approaching. Professor Valek insisted the system was a deterrent, not a wall. That distinction became the first thing he repeated during the sunset briefing. 22 students stood beneath the central canopy while the sky turned violet over the western ridges. Listen carefully, Valek said. The Hollow March is not hostile, it is indifferent. Those are different things. Taran shifted closer to his friend Selly Kaur. Selly noticed. You're doing that thing, she whispered. What thing? The thing where you pretend you're standing near me by accident. I am standing near you by accident. You moved 3 times. I was avoiding the wind. The wind is coming from behind us. Taran ignored her. Valak activated a holographic terrain map. Their camp glowed blue. The surrounding valleys filled with red lines. These are major Vaya movement corridors recorded during the last 60 local days. They change according to prey migration, temperature, and den location. Do not assume yesterday's safe route is today's safe route. One student raised a hand. Professor, how close do they come to camp? The deterrent normally keeps them beyond 200 meters. Normally. Taran did not like normally. Valak continued. During daylight hours, field groups may operate outside the perimeter under standard pairing rules. After sunset, nobody leaves camp without my direct authorization. The effect on the class was immediate. Several students glanced toward the darkening grass. Someone near the back asked how long the nights lasted. Another asked whether the perimeter system had redundant power. Selly quietly checked the charge level on her emergency beacon for the 4th time. Then Lena raised her hand. Valak nodded toward her. Yes, Ms. Ward. Just checking, we stay inside after dark because of the wolves. Silence. Taran actually turned to look at her. Valak's brow lifted. Our Vaya hounds are not wolves. I know, translation gave me the nearest Earth comparison. They average 180 kilograms. Lena considered that. Okay. They hunt in coordinated groups. Right. The largest documented pack in this region contained 14 adults. A few students shifted farther beneath the canopy. Lena scratched lightly at her cheek. So yes, because of the Vaya hounds. Valak stared at her for half a second longer than usual. Among other reasons. Got it. She lowered her hand. Taran could not stop himself. What exactly did you think a wolf was? Lena looked over. Pack predator. How large? Depends. Dangerous. Sure. And humans camp near them. Sometimes. Taran waited. That appeared to be the entire answer. You voluntarily sleep where pack predators live. They don't usually build their dens next to hotels. Several students looked at her. Lena shrugged. My family spent a lot of time in the mountains. Taran turned toward Selly. She is defective. Selly's mouth twitched. She's human. That was my second theory. Valak dismissed them to finish preparing the camp before full darkness. Taran expected Lena to join the other students checking doors, deterrent posts, and emergency equipment. Instead, she walked toward the western edge of camp. Not outside the perimeter. Just along it. She stopped beside the waste storage unit. Then she looked at the grass again. Taran watched for nearly a minute before curiosity defeated common sense. He followed. What are you doing? Checking something. What? The wind. You checked it when we landed. I checked it when we landed. That sounded like the same sentence. It was. Lena crouched beside the sealed waste unit. You smell anything? Taran inhaled. Cold air. Dust. Cooked protein from the mess shelter. A faint metallic sent from the perimeter emitter. No. Neither do I. Then why are we discussing smell? Because if neither of us can smell dinner from here, the wind's carrying it west. Taran looked west. The basin opened in that direction. So that's where anything downwind is getting the interesting news. What interesting news. That 23 soft university people arrived with food. Taran's neck heated again. 22. Lena looked at him. What? There are 22 students. I counted Valak. Those. She stood. The waste unit should be on the east side. Because of the wind. Because I don't like advertising dinner toward predator country. Taran folded his arms. The containment unit is sealed. Probably. It is certified. Great. You don't trust certified equipment. I trust wind more. Professor Valak appeared behind them before Taran could answer. What are you two doing? Taran pointed at Lena. She distrusts engineering. Lena pointed at the waste unit. Winds carrying camp sent toward the western corridor. Valak looked at the grass, then at the map on his tablet, then at the waste unit. His expression changed very slightly. He called 2 field assistants. 10 minutes later, the waste unit was moved to the eastern side of camp. Taran waited until Valak walked away. He agreed with you. Yeah. You sound disappointed. I was hoping for an argument. I had 3 more reasons ready. Taran looked toward the western ridge. A call rolled through the basin. Closer this time. He noticed Lena turn toward it before anyone else did. That bothered him. Not because she had noticed. Because she did not look frightened. Full darkness came at 1912 local time. At 1920, every student was inside a shelter. At 1931, Taran decided he had been foolish to worry. The modular sleeping shelter was bright, warm, and crowded. 6 students occupied the room, each pretending not to listen to the sounds outside. Valak had forbidden music or noise-canceling equipment during the first night. You are here to study an ecosystem, he had said, not hide from it. Taran considered this an irresponsible use of education. Sally sat on the bunk above him, cataloging sample containers. Across the room, Lena was repairing the strap on her field pack with a length of synthetic cord. Another Vaya call echoed beyond the shelter wall. Sally stopped moving. Taran pretended he had not. Lena pulled the knot tight. You're not even listening, Taran said. I am. You didn't react. I heard it. How far? Lena paused. Couldn't tell you. Then what are you listening for? Whether they're moving. Taran sat up. The pack. You can determine that from the calls. Not exactly, but one started west, then another answered southwest. Last one was farther south. Taran checked his tablet. The camp's passive acoustic map showed 3 approximate markers. West, southwest, south. He stared at Lena. You memorized them. I noticed them. That is what memorizing is. Not really. Sally leaned down from the upper bunk. What does it mean? Probably nothing. Taran frowned. You just said. I said they're moving. Toward us. No. How do you know? If they were coming straight toward camp, the angles would be closing. She returned to her strap. Sally watched her. What did you do on Earth? Lena smiled. Mostly homework. Taran made a disgusted sound. The human laughed quietly. No, seriously, my dad worked conservation surveys. My mother hated being indoors, so we camped. With wolves. Sometimes. And bears. Sometimes. What is a bear? Lena's smile widened. Larger problem. Taran decided not to ask. At 20:05, Professor Valek called everyone to the central mess shelter for a final equipment check. They crossed the camp in groups, even though they remained inside the perimeter. Outside the pool of camp lights, the silver grass had become a black ocean. Taran hated that description the moment it formed in his mind. Oceans contained things underneath them. So did grass. Valek stood beside the expedition map. We begin field sampling at dawn. Groups 1 through 4 take the east terraces. Groups 5 and 6 take the south ravines. Nobody approaches the western corridor until I inspect the fresh movement data. Lena looked toward the map. Professor. Yes. Could we see the last 3 days of pack positions? Valek opened the data. Lena stepped closer. Taran followed without knowing why. Red points filled the western basin. They were not random. Even Taran could see the loose curve. Lena traced it with one finger without touching the display. They keep cutting through here. Valek nodded. Native grazers use that drainage. Any dens mapped nearby. Not confirmed this season. Lena studied the map another moment. Okay. Taran waited for the conclusion. There wasn't one. You do that constantly, he said. What? Say things as if the rest of the thought isn't important. Usually I'm still thinking. That is inconvenient for everyone else. Sorry. She did not sound sorry. At 21:13, the first sensor alarm sounded. Every conversation stopped. A yellow indicator flashed on Valek's tablet. Peripheral contact, Sector 7. Taran's entire body tightened. Valek remained calm. Remain inside. He switched the central display to the perimeter camera. For 3 seconds, there was only grass. Then something moved. Low, long, gray under infrared. The camera corrected focus. Taran forgot to breathe. The Veya hound was larger than the orientation recordings suggested. Its shoulders reached nearly to Lena's chest. 6 limbs moved beneath a dense coat patterned in pale stripes, each step silent despite the creature's mass. Its head was narrow, ears flattened against the skull, 4 reflective eyes angled forward. It stopped 40 meters beyond the perimeter. The deterrent pulse changed frequency. The hound raised its head. Taran expected rage. A charge. Teeth. Instead, it stepped sideways. Sniffed. Then disappeared into the grass. The room remained silent. Selly whispered, that was 40 meters. 43, Valek corrected. Nobody found that reassuring. Lena was staring at Sector 7. Professor Valek noticed. What? Nothing. Ms. Ward. She hesitated. Could just be curious. And it approached from the west, got our scent, checked the boundary, left north. Valek studied her. That concerns you. Not yet. Taran nearly laughed. Not yet. Lena looked at him. If it wanted food badly enough to challenge the perimeter, it would have stayed. The words made Taran feel worse, which he considered an achievement. At 22:04, a second hound appeared. At 22:39, a third. None crossed the perimeter. None challenged the emitters. All came from roughly the same direction. All left north. At 23:10, Valek ordered everyone to sleep. Taran lay awake, listening to the hollow march. He heard the wind first, then insects, then the faint clicking of cooling shelter panels. For nearly 30 minutes, nothing howled. He had just begun to relax when he realized something. The silence was worse. Across the room, Lena sat upright. Taran whispered, "You noticed." She looked toward him. "Yes." "Why did they stop?" "Don't know." That was the first answer she had given all night that frightened him more than the question. The morning arrived bright and offensively beautiful. The hollow march under daylight looked almost harmless. Silver grass covered the basin in shining waves. Black rock shelves cut across the slopes. Thin ribbons of steam rose from thermal cracks, dissolving into the cold blue air. Taran hated the planet for pretending. The first field session passed without incident. Groups collected plant samples, insect analogues, and mineral readings within 2 kilometers of camp. Professor Valek rotated between teams. Lena spent most of the morning kneeling in dirt. Taran found this unexpectedly comforting. It made her seem less like some predator-eating human wilderness creature and more like another student. At 11:40, she misidentified a Nemorian spore pod and received a correcting lecture from Valek. At 12:15, she stepped into knee-deep mud. At 12:17, she discovered that laughing while pulling her boot free made the situation worse. Taran stored all 3 events for future use. By early afternoon, the class had relaxed. That was when Selly volunteered to help replace a malfunctioning atmospheric sensor at Station 12. The station sat only 800 meters south of camp. Valek approved the work. Selly left with field assistant Haran Pell at 14:30. At 16:05, Haran returned alone. Selly had remained behind to recalibrate the sensor array. "She has a locator," Haran said. "I told her to return by 16:30. Valek checked the sky. Clouds were gathering over the northern ridge. "Storm. Possibly." The hollow march where the system predicted a cold front before midnight. "Nothing severe. Just wind, fog, and a temperature drop." At 16:42, Selly had not returned. At 16:45, Valek called her. "Static." At 16:47, he tried again. This time, her voice came through. "Professor." Taran stepped closer. Valek activated speaker mode. "Your signal is unstable. Status." "I'm fine. Station 12's relay keeps dropping. I finished the recalibration." "Return immediately." "I am, I think." Valek frowned. "You think?" "My navigation map just froze." Lena stopped packing sample tubes. Valek said, "Stay where you are." A pause. "I can see the basalt spine north of camp." "Do not move." "But if I follow?" "Selly, stay." The channel crackled, then went dead. Valek checked her locator. A blue point blinked southeast of Station 12. Taran exhaled. She was less than a kilometer away. Then the point moved. "Southwest." Valek's expression hardened. "She isn't staying." Taran looked toward the western horizon. The sun was already touching the ridge. Darkness would come quickly once it dropped. Valek called 2 field assistants. "Emergency retrieval." Lena stepped forward. "Professor." "No. I didn't ask yet." "I know what you were going to ask." "Then you know I should come." Taran stared at her. Valek said, "You are a student." "So is Selly. I have trained personnel." Lena looked at the locator. "She's moving toward the western drainage." Valek's gaze sharpened. "How do you know?" "Look at the contour." The blue marker had shifted again. "Not directly west. Down, following the easiest slope." Valek expanded the map. Lena pointed. "She's trying to use the basin floor to reach camp." Yes, your pack map from last night. Valak pulled it up. Red movement lines appeared. The same loose curve Lena had noticed. They passed through the drainage. Taran felt his stomach tighten. Valak saw it too. He turned to Harren. Get Pell and Neris. Lena did not move. Professor, if the pack is using that drainage. We know. No, I mean if they're using it consistently, there's a reason. Valak looked at her. Praise. Maybe. Then what? Could be a den corridor. Taran's mouth went dry. Valak studied the map. No confirmed dens. Confirmed isn't the same as absent. The old professor's jaw tightened. What are you suggesting? She's moving toward something the hounds care about. If she keeps going, waiting here isn't safer. Valak looked from the map to Lena. The decision lasted only a second. Suit up. Taran stepped forward. I'm coming. Three heads turned toward him. Taran immediately regretted speaking. Valak said, why? Because Selly was his friend. Because he had stood next to her during orientation, complained beside her during lectures, copied half of her spectroscopy notes, and once spent 3 hours helping her rebuild a project after she accidentally deleted the original file. Because she was somewhere beyond the perimeter and darkness was coming. Because she knows my signal code, he said. Valak stared. That is your reason. No. Then give me the real one. She is my friend. Valak nodded once. Stay beside me. Taran looked at Lena. She was already checking the wind. They crossed the perimeter at 17:26. Taran had never experienced fear as something physical before. Not like this. His species had evolved on the open salt plains of Illith, where survival meant detecting danger early and reaching shelter faster than whatever had detected you. Fear was movement. Fear was distance. Fear was the sudden demand of the body to put solid structures between itself and uncertainty. Every step away from camp felt biologically incorrect. Valak carried a field shocker powerful enough to discourage most Nemorian fauna. Lena carried a flare launcher, medical kit, and nothing else that looked useful against a 180-kilogram pack predator. Taran carried his emergency beacon and wished it were a wall. The light faded faster than expected. Fog began forming in the lower ground. They found Selly's first tracks after 12 minutes. Valak knelt. She came through here. Taran saw nothing. Lena pointed to a patch of disturbed silver grass. She's favoring the left side. Valak looked. Injury. Maybe just terrain. They followed. 5 minutes later, the first Vaya call sounded. Taran stopped. Lena immediately said, keep walking. It took Taran's body a moment to obey. Another call answered. Closer. His pulse hammered. Are they hunting us? Don't know. You say that too often. Would you rather I lied? Yes. No. Valak glanced back. Enough. The fog thickened. The lamps turned the air white. Taran could see perhaps 30 meters. Then 20. The third call came from their right. Lena stopped. Taran nearly collided with her. What? She lifted one hand. Everyone went silent. Nothing. Then Lena slowly turned her head left. Taran strained to hear. A low rhythmic pulse came through the fog. Not a howl. Almost a clicking growl. Valak whispered, contact communication. Lena nodded. You know it. No, but wolves do something similar when they're coordinating close. Earth wolves are not Vaya hounds. I know. Then don't assume. I'm not assuming, I'm comparing. Taran's locator chimed. Zelly. 200 meters. They moved quickly. The terrain dropped into a shallow ravine bordered by basalt shelves. Selly's beacon blinked from beneath an overhang. Taran almost ran. Lena caught his sleeve. Wog. That is Selly. I know. She could be hurt. Then don't arrive looking like something being chased. Taran stared at her. What? Wog. He wanted to argue. Valak said, do it. They reached Selly. She crawled from beneath the rock shelf, shaking hard enough that her equipment harness rattled. Taran. He grabbed her shoulders. You're injured. No. Then why? I saw one. Everyone froze. Valak crouched beside her. How close? Maybe 50 meters, I don't know. It came out of the grass and looked at me. What did you do? I ran. Lena closed her eyes briefly. Selly saw it. What? Nothing. No, what? Lena crouched. Did it chase? For a little. How long? I don't know. Did it stay behind you or angle? Selly stared. What? Think this matters. Was it directly behind you? Selly's breathing slowed slightly. No. Which side? My right. Lena looked at Valak. He looked grim. Taran said, what? Lena pointed up the ravine. If it wanted to catch her, it would have followed her line. Valak nodded slowly. It was pushing her, or warning her away. Taran looked behind them. From what? A sound came through the fog. Low. Close. Taran's body moved before his thoughts did. He turned toward the ravine mouth. Two pale eyes appeared. Then two more. Then another set. 3 Vaya hounds stepped from the grass. Every instinct Taran possessed screamed the same command. Run! Lena's hand clamped around his wrist. Don't! The word was barely above a whisper. The largest hound stood perhaps 35 meters away. Its head was low. Not crouched. Not charging. Low. Another animal moved left. A third remained behind. Taran's breath came too quickly. They're surrounding us. No. They are literally moving around us. Look at where they're looking. I am looking at the teeth. Taran. Something in Lena's voice cut through the panic. He forced himself to look. The hounds were not staring at the group. Not exactly. Their attention kept shifting past them. Up the ravine. Toward the basalt shelves. The largest one took 2 steps forward. Selly made a strangled sound. Lena whispered, nobody move fast. Valak slowly raised his shocker. Lena looked at it. Professor. I know. If you fire. I know. He lowered the weapon slightly. The lead hound stopped. Its ears flattened. A pulse vibrated from its chest. Another answered from somewhere behind the rocks. Not from the 3 animals they could see. Taran's mind finally caught up. There's another one. Lena nodded. Behind us. Selly whispered, we are trapped. Lena looked toward the ravine wall. No. What do you mean no? They're not closing. The lead hound moved again. 1 step. 2. Its body angled. Lena shifted sideways. Follow me. Taran stared. Where's? Left. That is away from camp. I know. We need to go north. Not right now. She moved. Slowly. Not turning her back. Not staring directly at the hounds either. Valak followed. Taran pulled Selly with him. Every cell in his body objected. The lead hound watched. Another animal stepped toward the space they had just vacated. Then Taran heard it. A high whining sound from behind the basalt. Lena stopped. Her eyes widened slightly. Den. Valak looked at her. Juveniles. Sounds like it. The professor's face changed. Taran understood. Selly had run directly toward a den. The adult that followed her had not been trying to catch her. It had been trying to turn her. They had entered the ravine and placed themselves between a pack and its young. Taran's knees felt weak. Lena whispered, "We keep moving left, give them the ravine." Nobody argued. They moved 10 meters. Then 20. The hounds advanced into the space. Not toward them. Past them. The largest adult stopped once. Turned its head. Looked directly at Lena. Taran saw her swallow. For the first time since arriving on Nemoris, the human looked afraid. Not panicked. Afraid. There was a difference. She held still. The hounds stared. Then turned away. The pack vanished into the ravine. For several seconds, nobody moved. Taran's lungs remembered how to work. Selly whispered, "They let us go." Lena exhaled. "We left." "What?" "They didn't let us do anything. We stopped being the problem." Taran looked at her. "You knew." "No. You told us exactly what to do." "I guessed based on behavior." "That was not guessing. It absolutely was." Valak stared toward the ravine. "An informed hypothesis." Lena gave him a grateful look. "Thank you." Taran turned toward the dark grass where the hounds had disappeared. A strange thought settled over him. The creatures had been frightening before. They were still frightening. But the fear had changed shape. They were no longer monsters waiting in darkness. They had wanted something. Space. Safety around their young. Distance. The human had seen that while Taran had seen only teeth. "What happens now?" Selly asked. Valak checked his tablet. "Now we return." The screen flickered. Then went black. Valak tapped it. Nothing. A second device beeped. One of the field assistance status alerts appeared. Camp perimeter power degradation. Valak's face hardened. Another alert. Then another. Taran said, "What is happening?" Cold front arrived faster than forecast. Lena looked toward the basin. Wind pushed through the ravine. Harder now. Can the perimeter run without main power? Backup cells. For how long? Valak checked. 40 minutes at full deterrence. Selly laughed once. It was not humor. That's enough to reach camp. Valak did not answer. Lena noticed. What? The western power junction is down. So, the deterrent loop is no longer complete. Taran felt the world become very small. Meaning, Sector 6 through 9 have no active field. Lena looked back toward the direction of camp. Which side? Valak met her eyes. West. They returned at 1838. The storm reached camp 6 minutes later. Cold wind tore across the basin hard, enough to flatten the silver grass. Fog poured between the basalt shelves. Every student was awake and gathered inside the central shelter. Professor Valek walked directly to the power console. The display showed 3 failed perimeter nodes. Harren Pell had already tried bypassing the damaged circuit. "It won't hold," he said. "Moisture got into the junction." "How long on local batteries?" 32 minutes now. Taran looked through the shelter window. Nothing existed beyond the nearest lights. No ridge, no grass, no sky, just fog. Sally sat wrapped in a thermal blanket. She had stopped shaking. Lena stood beside the terrain map. Her hair was wet, face pale from cold. Taran joined her. "We made it back." "Yeah. You don't sound happy." She pointed to the map. "Where's the nearest hardened shelter?" Taran stared. "We are in the shelter. No permanent." Valek heard. "Research Station Kepler, Northeast Ridge." "How far?" 2.3 kilometers. Taran turned. "You are suggesting we leave?" Lena looked at him. "I'm asking where it is." "At night?" "Yes." "With Vaya hounds?" "Yes." "After the professor specifically told us not to leave camp after dark." Lena gave him a tired look. "I remember. That was less than 2 hours ago." "I also remember time." Valek stepped closer. "Why Kepler?" Lena enlarged the movement map. "Camps beside the western corridor." "Yes." "The deterrent is failing." "Yes." "Storms pushing everything lower." Valek's expression changed. Lena continued. "If prey moves through here tonight, predators follow, and our camp smells like 23 people, stored food and warm equipment." Harren said the shelters are reinforced. "Against weather and animal impact." "One animal." Harren hesitated. Lena pointed to the perimeter display. "Last night they tested the boundary one at a time. Tonight the boundary is disappearing." One of the students said, "So we remain inside and activate emergency rescue." Valek shook his head. "Orbital shuttle cannot descend in this wind." "Then we wait until morning." Lena looked at the professor. He looked back. Taran saw the decision forming before Valek spoke. "No." The class went silent. Valek activated the map. Kepler Station was built into basalt. Manual doors, independent thermal system, no exposed food storage. It is safer than remaining beside a failed deterrent line. Someone near the rear said, "We were told leaving camp after dark was prohibited." "Yes," Valek said, "under normal conditions." The student looked terrified. "These aren't normal conditions." "No." Taran looked at Lena. She had already begun packing. The irony made him almost angry. Yesterday, the darkness itself had seemed to be the problem. Now the safest choice was to walk directly into it. Valek assigned positions. 2 field assistants front. Students in pairs. Selly placed near the center. Valek rear left. Lena rear right. Taran found his own name beside Lena's. He stared at the display. "You did that." Valek did not look up. "You listened to her." "That is not a qualification." "Tonight it is." Taran had no answer. They left camp at 1921. The last perimeter battery died 11 minutes later. Walking through the hollow march at night was worse than Taran had imagined. The fog swallowed depth. Their lamps illuminated droplets, but little else. The wind constantly changed direction as it moved around the basalt formations. Every dark shape looked alive until approached. Every living shape looked like stone until it moved. Valak ordered silence, except for necessary communication. The group traveled in a tight column. Lena hated the column. Closer, she said. The students shifted. Closer than that. One student protested. We need space to move. You need space in daylight. Right now you need to look like one large thing. Taran said, is that an Earth rule? It's a don't look easy rule. Valak supported her. Close formation. They tightened. The first kilometer passed without contact. Taran began to believe they might reach Kepler untouched. Then the calls stopped. Again. Lena noticed first. This time so did Taran. He looked at her. She looked back. Neither spoke. The group continued. 5 minutes. 10. No Vaya calls. Taran's fear rose with every silent minute. A student near the front whispered, why is nothing making noise? Could be storm, Taran said. Lena looked unconvinced. Then the wind changed. It struck them from the south. Lena stopped. The column compressed behind her. Valak said, what? She lifted her face. Taran copied her without thinking. He smelled wet grass. Stone. Mud. Something musky. Animals. His stomach dropped. You smell that? Lena asked quietly. Taran nodded. It came and went with the wind. Valak moved to them. How fresh. Lena almost smiled. I am not a Nemorian scent analyst. Best estimate. Close enough. The professor turned. Keep formation. They moved. Another 100 meters. Something shifted in the fog to the left. A student screamed. The shape vanished. The column broke for half a second. Hold, Valak shouted. Everyone stopped. Taran's species wanted exactly the opposite. His body wanted distance. Shelter. Speed. He looked toward Lena. She was staring left. Did you see it? Movement. Hound. Maybe. That word again. Maybe. A second shape appeared to the right. Someone near the center gasped. Then a third flickered ahead. The youngest student in the group, Pelin Voss, broke. He ran. Not far. Perhaps 3 steps. But those 3 steps changed everything. The fog exploded. A Vaya hound burst from the grass. Pelin screamed. Taran moved without thinking. He caught the back of Pelin's harness. The younger student fought him. Let me go. No. It's coming. Lena shouted, stand. Taran planted both feet. Every instinct demanded he release Pelin and run faster. He did not. The hound crossed their light. 20 meters. 15. Its body angled directly toward Pelin. Taran remembered Selly. Not behind. Angled. Pushy. But this one was different. Its head was level. Eyes locked. Stride lengthening. Hunting. Taran, Lena shouted. He dragged Pelin backward into the group. Bodies closed around them. The hound stopped. So suddenly that its claws tore lines through wet soil. It stared. The cluster of students stared back. The animal took 1 step. Nobody ran. Another. Lena raised both arms slightly, enlarging her outline. Valak did the same. Taran copied them. The hound's ears shifted. Its posture changed. Then it turned sideways and disappeared. Pelin collapsed against Taran. I thought. I know. Taran could barely speak. He looked at Lena. She nodded once. Not praise. Acknowledgement. He understood the difference. They kept moving. Now Taran watched differently. Not just for predators. For patterns. The grass. Wind. Open terrain. Rock shelves. Where the group cast scent. Where a running animal might approach. Fear was still there. But it had acquired questions. That made it smaller. Not much. Enough. At 2017, they reached the long exposed plain beneath Kepler Ridge. The station was visible above them as 3 dim emergency lights set into black rock. 700 meters. Open ground. No cover. The fog thinned here because of the wind. Taran could finally see farther than 30 meters. He wished he could not. Shapes moved on the far side of the plain. 1, 2, 4, 6. They are hounds. The entire column stopped. Nobody screamed. They had learned at least that much. Valak raised binoculars. Black. Lena watched. Taran whispered, "Are they between us and Kepler?" "Yes." "So now what?" She said nothing. The pack moved. Not toward them. Across them. Left to right. Valak lowered the binoculars. "They're blocking the route." Lena frowned. "No." Taran looked at her. "You can see them." "I can." "They are literally in front of the route. They're not looking at us." That sentence again. Taran forced himself to look beyond teeth. The hounds' heads were angled south. Their bodies tense. Waiting. Then something burst from the fog. A herd of small Nemorian grazers poured across the plain. Dozens. Thin-legged. Vast. The Veya hounds exploded into motion. The pack crossed the humans' path because the prey crossed first. Within seconds, predators and herd vanished east. Lena exhaled. They weren't blocking us. Valak nodded. They were hunting. Pelin made a weak sound. "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "No," Lena said, "but it's useful." They resumed. 300 meters remained when the storm intensified. Rain hit sideways. The temperature fell. The group climbed toward the basalt shelf beneath Kepler Station. Taran could see the door now. A rectangle of yellow emergency light. 200 meters. Then the pack called. Not distant. Close. Multiple directions. The columns stopped. Taran counted without meaning to. 1 call left. 1 behind. 2 right. Then silence. Lena said, "Tight." Everyone closed formation. Valak whispered, "Move." They advanced 50 meters. A Veya hound appeared directly ahead. Then another. And another. This time they did not cross the trail. They stood. The lead animal faced them. Taran heard someone begin to cry. No one ran. Lena looked right. Then left. Something's wrong. Valak gripped his shocker. "What?" "I don't know." The lead hound growled. A deep vibration passed through the air. The humans, there was only one human, Taran corrected himself, Lena. She stepped toward the exposed right side of the group. Taran grabbed her sleeve. "What are you doing?" "Trying to see." "That is the direction of the predators." "I noticed." She leaned slightly, then stopped. Something moved in the ditch beside the trail. Small. A juvenile Veya hound crawled from a drainage cut. It was perhaps half the size of an adult. One hind limb dragged. The group collectively understood. The juveniles stood between them and the pack. More precisely, they stood between the juvenile and several adults. The lead hound stepped forward. Taran felt Pelin tense beside him. "No running," Taran said. The words came out before Lena could say them. Pelin stared at him. Taran tightened his grip on the younger student's arm. "No running." Lena looked at him, then at the juvenile. "We need to give it a lane." Valak whispered, "Direction." "Right side, open." The group left. The professor immediately relayed it. "Slowly shift left, stay together." 23 bodies moved. Too fast at first. The hound growled. Everyone stopped. Lena's voice became very calm. Smaller steps. Taran obeyed. He could hear his own heartbeat. The juvenile limped forward. An adult appeared to their right. Then another behind it. The class compressed instinctively. Lena said, "Don't crouch." Nobody did. The juvenile looked at them. Taran stared at the wet fur. The animal was terrifying. It was also young. Injured. Trying to get back to its pack. Two truths at the same time. The juvenile took another step. Pelin whimpered. Taran whispered, "Stay." "I am." "Good." The lead adult moved. Lena raised one hand toward the class without looking back. "Hold." Taran had spent his entire life believing survival meant movement. Run before danger arrived. Reach shelter. Create distance. The Kepler station door was less than 150 meters behind the predators. A hardened structure. Safety. Every nerve in his body knew exactly where he should be. He stayed. The juvenile passed 20 meters in front of them. Then 15. Its injured leg gave way. It stumbled. The lead adult surged forward. Several students flinched. Nobody broke. Lena spoke softly. "Easy." Taran did not know whether she meant the students, the predator, or herself. The juvenile stood. Limped again. Crossed the final distance. The adult reached it. Touched its muzzle against the juvenile's neck. For one strange second, the hollow march went still. Rain. Wind. 23 terrified students. 7 predators. Then the lead hound looked at them. Directly. Its eyes reflected their lamps. Lena lowered her gaze slightly. Not submission. Not challenge. The animal breathed. Taran could hear it. Then the hound stepped backward. Another followed. The juvenile vanished between 2 adults. The pack withdrew into the rain. Nobody moved. 1 second. 5. 10. Valak finally whispered, "Continue." They reached Kepler station at 2041. The doors closed behind the last student. Only then did Taran's legs stop working. He sat on the floor. Around him, students laughed, cried, shook, hugged, or simply stared at the walls. Selly found him and dropped down beside him. "You came back for me." Taran looked at her. "You ignored a direct order." "My navigation failed." "Then you continued walking." "I panicked." "Yes." Selly rested her head against the wall. "Thank you." Taran nodded. Across the station, Lena removed her wet jacket. Her hands were shaking. Taran stared. She noticed. "What?" "You are shaking." I'm freezing. No. She looked at her hands. Those. For a moment, she seemed surprised by them. Then she laughed once. Not loudly. Adrenaline. You were scared. Lena looked at him as if the statement were obvious. Of course, I was scared. Taran's translator must have failed. What? There were 7 giant alien pack predators 20 meters away. You told everyone not to panic. I told everyone not to run. Those are different. Very. Taran stared at her. Lena sat opposite him. My grandfather used to say fear is your body sending you a report. Sometimes the report is useful. Sometimes it's just very dramatic. Taran almost smiled. You have a human saying for everything. Mostly grandparents do. Valak approached. His clothes were soaked. He lowered himself onto a storage case. Ms. Ward. Professor. I owe you an apology. Lena frowned. For what? Yesterday I assumed your question about the Veya hounds indicated insufficient understanding. Those. You understood the danger. Some of it. Valak looked toward the sealed door. More than most. Lena shook her head. I understood familiar pieces. That's not the same thing. You recognized their territorial behavior. Because I've seen similar behavior. You recognized the pursuit trigger. Same. You identified the juvenile passage. Professor. Valak stopped. I got lucky too. The room quieted around them. Lena looked toward the door. I don't know Veya hounds, I know Earth predators. Similar isn't identical. Taran frowned. Then how did you know what to do? I didn't know. Again. That answer. But now it sounded different. I had better guesses than panic, she continued. Valak had better species data than I did. We used both. Taran looked at the professor. Valak nodded. She is correct. Taran hated the answer less than before. He looked down at his hands. When Pelin ran, the hound chased. Yes. My species evolved to run. Lena leaned back against the wall. Humans do too. You told us not to. Because instinct isn't always advice. Taran considered that. Outside, something howled. Several students stiffened. Taran did too. But this time, another thought arrived beside the fear. Direction. Distance. Meaning. He listened. The call came from below the ridge. Another answered farther east. Moving away. He looked at Lena. She was already watching him. East, he asked. Her smile appeared slowly. Sounds like it. The storm passed before dawn. At 05:40, the Kepler station windows began to brighten. Nobody had slept much. Professor Valak waited until full daylight before opening the outer door. Cold air entered. The basin below looked transformed. Silver grass lay flattened beneath rain. Thin streams ran through every depression. Mist curled around the basalt shelves. Taran stood at the doorway beside Selly. Lena walked outside first. He almost objected. Then remembered the sun was up. He followed. The class spread carefully across the rock apron. Everything smelled clean. Wet mineral. Grass. Earth. Taran had never understood why humans used their planet's name as a word for soil. Now, standing beside Lena, he almost did. She walked down toward the muddy path. Stopped. Crouched. Taran joined her. Tracks crossed the ground. Their own from the night before, were messy and deep. Boot prints overlapping. Drag marks. Mud kicked sideways where frightened students had stumbled. Across them ran larger impressions. Four-toed. Wide. Veya hound. Taran counted. At least 5 separate animals had crossed the trail after the expedition reached Kepler. One set passed so close to their old footprints that the edges touched. He stared. They came through here after us. Looks like it. They could have followed. Yep. They didn't. Nope. Taran looked at her. Why? She shrugged. Maybe they had better things to do. That is your scientific explanation. I'm off duty until breakfast. Taran looked back at the tracks. For most of his life, predators had existed in stories his species told about its evolutionary past. Things that came from the horizon. Things that chased. Things that survived because someone else failed to reach shelter. The Hollow March had not made those stories false. Running still saved lives. Fear still mattered. Shelter still mattered. But somewhere during the night, Taran had discovered another category. Danger that could be understood without becoming harmless. He noticed the grass moving. Eased. A light breeze came down from the ridge. Without thinking, he lifted his face. Lena looked over. What? Taran inhaled. Wet grass. Stone. Nothing musky. Wind changed. Lena followed his gaze. Yeah. From the east. Yeah. He pointed toward the tracks. So if the hounds were west of us, they would smell us before we smelled them. Lena smiled. Probably. Taran studied the ground again. A faint call rolled across the basin. Several students behind them went quiet. Taran turned his head. The sound came from far south. Another answered east. He listened until it faded. Then he looked at Lena. They're moving. She did not answer immediately. She was watching him with an expression he had seen humans use when something pleased them more than they wanted to admit. Finally she said, "Sounds like it." Taran stood. He did not feel fearless. That would have been absurd. The Hollow March still contained animals capable of killing him before he could finish shouting for help. The Veya hounds were still larger than anything his ancestors had survived in thousands of years. Darkness would come again that evening. And when it did, Taran knew he would remember every eye that had reflected his lamp from the fog. But he also knew something else now. Fear was not the end of the thought. He looked down at the crossing tracks one last time. Human boots. Alien boots. Veya prints. All pressed into the same wet ground. 3 kinds of creatures had passed through the Hollow March during the storm. None had needed the others to die. Behind him, Professor Valek called the students inside for breakfast. Taran started toward the station, then stopped. He glanced back at the silver grass. The wind touched his face first. Far across the basin, a pack called once. Taran listened. Then he followed Lena inside without running.